My name is Kimberly McNabb, and as always, I am joined by my husband, Barrett McNabb. First, we will discuss origins, challenges, and solutions to the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Barrett, who was an infantry officer in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as a foreign area officer, will offer his thoughts on how to end the Russian-Ukraine conflict for good. So at the GOP debate, no one really offered a satisfactory solution. In your experience on two battlefronts, your travels, all of your reading of current events, and your experience as a foreign area officer, how do you think we can end this conflict?
This is really really hard. I mean, obviously you have two types of wars. You have high intensity conflicts, which have linear battlefields, and then you have low intensity conflicts or guerrilla warfare and asymmetric battlefields. And there's three ways. There's three things you can do. You either say, look, Ukraine, we're not going to support you anymore. What Russia has, Russia gets, and you just have to kind of suck it up. Obviously, Ukraine's not going to want to do that. No country ever.
It'll be more tomorrow.
It'll be more tomorrow, and that would embolden Putin as well further. And he has a stated goal to try and recapture the sphere of influence that the original Soviet Union had. In fact, Putin has always lamented that the greatest geopolitical failure in the history of the world, or at least definitely in modern times, was the downfall and breakup of the Soviet Union. So he wants to try and recapture and have that sphere of influence again. And that includes the Baltic states. That includes Poland. That includes Latvia, Estonia. And these are NATO countries. And so what we do here is super important. So that's option one. It's not desirable for the above mentioned reasons. Option two is to continue to support Ukraine with instruction and material. And material is just military speak for military equipment. And but here's the thing on that. We have to be decisive. We have to give them all the things that they need and have asked for, and we have to do it in a timely manner. The big problem that I have seen is that we have not come up with a good strategy, obviously I'm not in the Pentagon right now. I'm looking at this from the outside. Either we do have a good strategy and the Biden administration is ineptly executing it, which is entirely possible, or the military has devised a strategy and it's being ignored, which is another possibility, but which I hope not. But when we have a request from Ukraine and they say, hey, we want missiles and we want ATACMS Block 2 Alpha, and we say, no, we're not going to give you ATACMS Block 2 Alpha. We're going to give you the shorter range rockets that'll come out of the HIMARS, but you can have some HIMARS. Okay, we really need Patriot. Nope, can't have Patriot. That's an escalation that we don't want to get to. Hey, we're really getting bombed here by Russians. A lot of civilians are dying. 6 months later, okay, you can have Patriot, and we'll do that. Okay, well, we need tanks. Nope, can't give you tanks.
And meanwhile, Russia's restocking and
yeah,
getting more people to the front lines.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the big thing. So, just trickling in every 3 months an enabler. Because again, none of these things, the F-16 fighters, the M1 Abrams, the HIMARS, Block 2 Alpha versus the standard HIMARS, the Bradley fighting vehicles, the Leopard 2. These are all enablers. They're not silver bullets. So it's not, oh, they have Abrams, well, now they're going to win. But in combined arms warfare, you have to have support. You have to have aerial support. You have to have infantry support. You have to have artillery support. You can't just, none of these individual things are a silver bullet. But feeding them into a meat grinder, one at a time, one enabler at a time, means you can't do combined warfare. You can't do it. So the Biden administration and NATO needs to be decisive and say, what are all the things that we're going to give to them, and give them a combined arms package that includes all at once, that includes air, artillery, maneuver forces, and it has to be given all at one time. And so, just but we don't want to make Putin mad. But then, 6 months later, or 3 months later, 6 months later, we add the enabler and say, okay, we can have the M1 Abrams. But again, it's the problem is as President Zelensky was asking for these things, he was asking for them in a specific timeline, and he had to start his counteroffensive when the spring fighting season opened up, and the winter and the mud and things like that could allow for tracked maneuver operations and offensive operations. But the characteristics of the offense are audacity, concentration, tempo, and surprise. And we let kind of Putin take over, some of the initiative in conducting the defense. And so, we watched them build a defense, a layered defense, so that you've got first, second, and third layers of defense. And I tell you, I've only seen a deliberate defense one time in my military career. A textbook, true to life, deliberate defense, and it was as an ROTC cadet. And I went to Fort Lewis, Washington for advanced summer field training, which is the big field exam, six and a half weeks long, where they test all the ROTC cadets in the United States, and they phase them in. So every week a new group of cadets goes through. But they had a static display. And they had a static platoon in the defense display. And again, it's the first and only time that I've ever seen something like this. And so, I've been in the Army for a long time and fought in multiple wars, had defensive structures that I had built, and I'm not talking about a forward operating base or HESCO barriers and Jersey barriers and Alaska barriers and Texas barriers and things like that made out of concrete. This is you're moving in, you're occupying a defense against a mechanized and or light infantry, but to have the foxholes with overhead cover. In front of the foxholes, you have all the sector sketches all laid out. And these are things you're all supposed to do. You're supposed to do all of these things. But all the sector sketches, all of the interlocking fields of fire, you have your target reference points to be able to shift artillery and mortars off of. But then we get into the stuff that I haven't seen, and to have tanglefoot put down. And tanglefoot is, if you can imagine, barbed wire, but instead of having it be vertically attached to a stake so that it creates a horizontal fence, if you can imagine that fence is now lying on the ground and is about 2 inches 2 to 5 inches above the ground. So it's like a barbed wire fence lied down on its side, but then hovering at 2 inches. And it's crisscrossed with all the barbed wire, so that when the machine guns open up and the enemy infantry have to get down, what they are doing is they're now levitating on 5 inches above the ground on horizontal barbed wire. And so they're having to, so it's, if you have played football and you've got the little thing where you've got looks like a ladder that's on the ground, and the football player's high step
Right.
over it. So you could do that,
Quite difficult to fight like that.
But you're high stepping, so you don't trip on the tanglefoot. But now you're kind of hopping around to find where you can put your feet while you're being shot at with fully automatic, weapons and rifles and things like that. So you want to get down. So then you get down, and now you're crawling, but you're not on the ground. You're levitating and being suspended by barbed wire, and so you're crawling over the barbed wire. Anyway, not a good idea. And then prior to the tanglefoot, you have the triple standard concertina wire obstacles, and a lot of times people mistakenly even in the military call it a triple strand concertina wire obstacle, but the doctrinal term is a triple standard, and it's rolls of concertina wire. And concertina wire is different than it's also called razor wire. It's different than barbed wire. It actually has what looks like small razor blades that are intermittently placed onto these coils, and they are there's two bottom layers, one next to each other, and then a third layer goes on top of that to create a three layered, and they have stakes that are in, so you just can't move it, and so you got to go through that stuff. And I've never seen a deliberate defense since then until Ukraine. Until the counteroffensive that we're seeing in 2023 that we allowed the Russians to do and to build a defense in depth until then, with their dragon's teeth and their concertina wires and their minefields. It was a lot of setup, and the big thing is we watched them do it. We watched them do it. We could see satellite imagery, and the Russians have a vehicle that it digs into the ground, and it makes a anti-vehicle trench. So it chews up the ground, and then it spits it out. And they did it correctly. They put the spoil on the friendly side of the trenches. So the Russians know how to build a trench, but because if you put the spoil, which is the loose dirt that you've dug up, if you put it on the enemy side, then as they're coming to breach the trench, they can just push the dirt back into the trench and then drive over it. So you want to put the spoil on the friendly side of your trench, and the Russians did do that. So they did that correctly. But the concrete barriers, the dragon's teeth, and what those are designed to do is to throw the tracks of a armored vehicle and make you have to stop, because once you throw a track, you have to put it back on, and now you're a sitting duck. And then you have the minefields and things like that. And again, once the Ukrainians breach through this, then that they have to go to the second layer of defense, and they're lessened, but we're not giving them all of the things that we need. Now, one of the things that I have not seen, and I would think that we would see pictures of them, but why don't they have a MICLIC? And I'll put a picture of what a MICLIC is, but it's an armored vehicle chassis that's tracked, and it has what looks like a giant fire hose, all coiled up and down on the back deck, and then it has a single, looks like a grappling hook, but it's a rocket, and what it does is it fires and it drags this fire hose. It's a really thick hose forward, and it scatters and it lands on the ground, and then but all of it's C4. It's a big giant hose of C4, and you press the button and it blows up and it creates a lane through the minefields. And I haven't seen any of those. Why do they not have MICLICs where they can go and breach these minefields and blow up the mines? I mean, that's what high intensity conflict. I mean, we have doctrine that says we're supposed to do that. That should have been one of the things that they should have been given. And if there's been an improvement over the MICLIC, then they should have gotten the improvement as well. But going and clearing these mines hand by hand is what the Ukrainians are doing. They're going under the cover of darkness, sending small teams. They go in, they're using their hands to dig up these mines, and then in the morning, then they retrograde out of there, and the the Ukrainians are able to drive through those lanes. But you could do it so quickly with a MICLIC, one shot go. Giving them the tanks, saying, hey, look, we're going to give 21 tanks. Hey, Germany's going to give, 10 Leopard 2s. Estonia is going to give, 10 Leopard 1s, whatever it is. Excuse me. But what we need to do is we need to give these vehicles, whether they're tanks or armored personnel carrier, in military units. We need to give a battalion of tanks. We need to give a brigade of tanks. We need to provide all the enablers at one time. And so it's not that, hey, we provided 10. NATO needs to say, we're providing 3 brigade combat teams. And this brigade combat team it consists of these vehicles. And then afterwards, if you want to say Estonia gets a shout out because they gave 5, fine.
Right.
But we need to be giving combat units to Ukraine, not trickling in these enablers.
I'm sure planning for Zelensky with this piecemeal fashion is a planning nightmare.
Yeah, I'm sure it is as well. I mean, and exacerbating it is what is people don't see is all the stuff that's the not sexy part, but is beyond important, is all of the differing logistics and maintenance trains for each of these vehicles. They all take different parts. Now, metric wrenches versus imperial wrenches or socket wrenches and things like that. That I'm not talking about that stuff, but parts. A lot of these parts aren't the same. I mean, the Abrams uses a diesel turbine engine that runs on jet fuel. Okay, and so it is literally a jet engine, and they turned it sideways and they put it down inside the tank, and that's why that's why the tank is heavy, because it has all of that horsepower to propel it, but it's also really fast and it's super quiet. But all of the other vehicles use diesel engines. And so that's just a second and third order consideration. So each of these vehicles, have different fuel requirements. Now that NATO equipment, it's all usually run on military diesel. We have JP8 that the aircraft use and the M1 Abrams uses as well. But still, all the different parts and things like that, and nobody likes to talk about it, but logistics is super important, super important. One of the things that when I was going through the infantry officer basic course, I had there was a captain from the Royal Thai Army that was going through the infantry officer basic course as well as a foreign exchange. And one of the things that he had said is, as I was talking about warfare and things like that, and he said, Lieutenant McNabb, every country has its heroes. What makes the United States so superior is your logistics. And that was been in the Army for less than 3 months, and that was pretty eye-opening. That they acknowledge that it's the logistics, it's getting all of your enablers to the fight, soon as possible, and that's the big thing. So I mean, as we look at our doctrine, and I later became a trainer for U.S. Officer candidates going through officer candidate school. We would practice all of the battle drills, and they are a battle drill is something that you don't have to think about. It's already pre-planned. It just react to near ambush, react to indirect fire. You don't want to, as artillery is coming in, that's not the time for you to say, okay, what should we do? It's a battle drill. It becomes muscle memory. And one of the battle drills was enter and clear a trench. And it was interesting that this particular candidate said, this is so stupid. Why are we learning World War II battle drills. This is BS. And at the time, I said, well, what do you think a wadi is? And if you don't know what a wadi is a dry creek bed. So, what does a dry creek bed look like that is shoulder high and you can run around in it? It looks like a trench. And that's what the Taliban and Al Qaeda were using when I was fighting in Afghanistan. As trenches. I mean, they're using them as natural obstacles and natural trenches. And so, but now, fast forward even more, and enter and clear a trench is relevant because here we see trench warfare again, and it is important. One of the things that we had, and General Petraeus was widely touted as the counterinsurgency coin warfare expert, and he said, counterinsurgency warfare is PhD level warfare, and there's that's fine. That's fine to say that. I mean, it is difficult because you're trying to win hearts and minds and things like that. But here's why the infantry officer advanced course and now the maneuver officer advanced course, they still teach full up high intensity conflict, and we need to do that. And I'm glad that we still do that as a military. And this is during the smack dab in the middle of all the coin fighting that we were doing, and the lessons learned between a counterinsurgency fight and a high intensity conflict fight are drastically different. If you make a mistake in a guerrilla warfare fight, a low intensity conflict, you could lose a platoon. And if you're not knowing, where everybody is and that you haven't paid attention to where the insurgents are and things like that. But if you make a mistake in a high intensity conflict, you lose a brigade combat team. All right. And so you're talking about losing 40 men in a low intensity conflict mistake versus 3,500 men and women in a brigade combat team. And so that is the reason why we always need to be, keeping track of what our doctrine is, continuously updating it. We have been an army that's been designed and fighting in a mentality for an asymmetric fight, but we need to make sure as we see these high-intensity conflicts escalating around the world, we need to make sure that we're focused further than that. So the third thing that we could do is for the United States and NATO to straight up get involved, and that is probably the worst of all the ideas. But depending upon what our strategic, operational, and tactical goals are, it may be palatable. Now, obviously, we would want to make sure that we restricted all of our fighting to inside Ukraine. I mean, right. Obviously not going to attack targets deep inside Russia. That would just be bad because Russia would be just have to be obligated to do the same thing to NATO countries, and it would quickly escalate from there. So we would be fighting with our hands tied behind our backs, so to speak, because we wouldn't be able to go after airfields and things like that, which the Ukrainians can't very effectively. Now they have done some deep attacks and gotten some airfield and destroyed aircraft, and awesome, good on them. But I'm talking about literally cratering airfields so that they're non-mission capable. We're just not going to be able to have that. So all the forces would have to be inside Ukraine's original territory, to include Crimea. That's Ukrainian territory, so that would be a stated goal as well. So again, the third option, not good because that would, or the least preferred, that would quickly escalate, I think, and that would be just a huge
Well, my
problem.
concern is if the U.S. and NATO got involved, what about Russia's allies as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, I mean,
That's my concern.
so now we have nuclear weapons in Belarus, right? So now Belarus, thumped their chest and said, "Hey, we have nuclear weapons now. Nobody mess with us. We're ready to use them." And in reality, Russia holds the codes. They're Russia's nuclear weapons. They're stored in Belarus, and Belarus does not have the ability to pop off a nuke. And so, it's a little disingenuous. I guess you just wanted to add a couple inches that morning or something like that in order to puff his chest out or whatever. So Belarus, I mean, they would have, I think, some of the same growing pains that the Russian army had. They used the same weapons and equipment and doctrine and tactics and things like that. So I think Belarus would still have some growing pains. Obviously, they've been watching what's been going on, and the Russian army is learning. Everybody, the world is learning what high intensity conflict looks like again, and everybody is taking notes. The biggest takeaway is the importance of drones have been in this conflict, and all the weapons contractors are all taking notes. I mean, drones have always been on UAVs and things like that have always been in the past 2 decades, part of war. You have the Predators and the Reapers and things like that. But I think now at the tactical level, the drone has just been elevated from both an ISR, an intelligence reconnaissance surveillance role, but also for a direct action and a direct attack role. So yeah, it's interesting, and I'm just sad that we're just keep trickling in the stuff. I mean, right now the Biden administration is considering in a positive light, so that's good, sending the ATACMS Block 2 Alphas for the HIMARS, and what that's going to be able to do is get them a 300-mile range on their weapon systems instead of the about 70 miles what they can do now. So the Ukrainians can do deep attacks into Russian territory. That supposedly they said, "Hey, look, we're not going to let you do straight up attacking Moscow or anything like that." But every single Navy ship in Sevastopol in Crimea, in the Black Sea Fleet, those could all be attacked. So I just hope that it's not too late. Russia has done a very good job of learning how to GPS jam HIMARS rockets, and so they're not as precise. Sometimes moving and attacking actually the wrong target, but still, I'll be honest, I'm don't know the guidance system difference between the standard HIMARS rocket and the ATACMS Block 2 Alpha. I don't know, but if it does rely on some of the same technology, Russia might be able to not necessarily defeat, but be able to mitigate the accuracy. So I mean, it's just the equipment just needs to arrive at the same time. Yep. But we need to make sure that we're applying constant pressure. I think it was a mistake for people to decide that there are fighting seasons, and you hear people say fighting seasons, and the same thing happened in Afghanistan as well. That winter was the non-fighting season, and spring, here comes the fighting season, and it was everybody in the wintertime was holed up in Pakistan, and they were sitting by their fires and talking about whatever. And then when the snow melted, then they would make their way out of the mountains of Pakistan and come in and start attacking and doing all their asymmetric warfare stuff. And so we need to, I think, get away from that. I mean, why were we not attacking the engineering vehicles that were conducting these trenches. I mean, engineers have three basic tasks. They they concentrate on mobility, counter mobility, and survivability. And at the entire winter and the beginning of the spring, we were allowing the Russians to do counter mobility, which was what all those obstacles are. And so, and then some survivability with bunkers and things like that. But still, the engineering vehicles like that are relatively rare. I'm not saying that Russia has one or even 14, but still taking out trench digging vehicles that we can see from outer space as they are digging a channel in the ground. Why would you stop for fighting season and not take out that vehicle? Yeah. So I mean, I'm just it's frustrating because I sit down and as an infantry officer, I'm like, this is how I would fight the war. and I understand that there's tactical, operational, and strategic considerations, but when I see something that could be fixed and that it's not being fixed, it's very, very frustrating.
Right. Well, I personally just happen to be a little biased here, but I certainly hope whoever is advising our next president has much more wisdom, much more knowledge, and much more experience, like you. Well, in the meantime, let's all pray that the situation can wait until January 2025, when the next president of the United States is sworn in.
Well, and that's a great point, because ultimately what Putin is going to do is he's going to play this as a waiting game. Mm-hmm. I mean, he has an elaborate defense in depth. It's slow going. He wants everyone to get bored. He wants everybody to be exhausted and to have
so he can do what he wants.
And to have have fatigue and eventually people are going to want to stop giving weapons and equipment to Ukraine. Putin has even in a press release, he had an economic meeting in eastern Russia right before Kim Jong-un made his way from North Korea into Russia to meet with Putin. And in that, he talked about the former President Trump's indictments. And he loves the confusion and the distractions and things like that.
Don't pay attention to us over here.
And he took it as a chance to lecture the world and lecture the United States about what democracy is. And it's just a distraction for us. And so he said, how can the United States be a bastion of democracy when they use their democracy to go after their political opponents? And that's something that some people have said, that this is literally a weaponization of an administration to go after the previous administration. But when Putin gets to say it as well, it's not as humorous. It's not as humorous, and so he is waiting for fatigue to set in on our side, so that he can have freedom of maneuver. But thank you for that compliment, Kimberly. And this concludes this segment. Please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.